Thank you. And today I'll be talking about a study that we published early last year that was conducted with myself and my co-authors Loic, Claire and Julia, looking at neutering of cats under veterinary care in Australia. So just disclosures here. And just briefly, some background to this study. So as we all know, cats are prolific breeders, and unwanted litters of kittens contribute to the unowned, so feral or stray, and surrendered cat populations. And these unwanted cats or unowned cats contribute significantly to or create a significant economic, animal welfare and biodiversity impact on our society and other parts of the world as well. We know that prepubertal neutering, so less than 4 months of age, prevents unwanted litters, but there are very few studies actually looking at the age of neutering in cats in Australia, and that's what we were interested in. So the aims of this study were to use the VetCompass Australia database to access anonymised electronic patient records. And we had 3 specific aims. So we wanted to investigate prevalence and predictors of desexing among cats presenting to first opinion practices in Australia. So were the cats neutered or not? We wanted to investigate the age at which desexing was performed and its predictors. So were they neutered less than 4 months of age or not? And we also wanted to look at trends over time, so to compare age at neutering of cats born in 2 specific time periods, which we picked arbitrarily, so 2010 and later, or before 2010, and to investigate that further. So we accessed the entire VCA dataset, and the variables that we looked at included age, breed, age at desexing, and we determined that by looking at and searching through invoice data and then determining the date of neutering, state that the cat lived in, season of birth, postcode, and then we used 3 Australian Bureau of Statistics categorisations for these cats based on postcodes, so remoteness area, and we simply categorised them into cats living in major cities or not. And then 2 other indices of socioeconomic status. So index of economic resources, which has 5 different quantiles, and index of relative socioeconomic disadvantage, which also has 5 quantiles. And just briefly, the index of economic resources looks at things like income, housing expenditure and assets. And the index of relative socioeconomic disadvantage is determined by things like having a low income, low educational attainment, unemployment, and dwellings without cars as examples. We analysed our data using R and performed univariable and multivariable logistic regression. So when we looked at prevalence and predictors of desexing, we looked at about 52,000 cats that were born between 2010 and 2017. And of those, about 84% were neutered. And we found that sex, breed, location, socioeconomic indices as well were significantly influenced desexing status and the age at neutering. So we found that the odds of being desexed were higher in males and mixed breed cats compared to females and purebred cats. And cats from South Australia and Victoria had higher odds of being desexed compared with cats in New South Wales, whereas the odds were lower in cats from Queensland. And being desexed was less likely for cats from areas with less access to resources. So those postcodes that were more remote had more low-income households and greater relative socioeconomic disadvantage. And when we looked at age of desexing and its predictors, we had age at neutering available for about 16,000 cats from that 2010 to 2017 time category. And of those, a bit over half were male, 80% were mixed breed, and about 23% were desexed by 4 months of age and 62.6% by 6 months of age. And the median age at which cats were neutered was 6 months, with a range anywhere from sort of less than 1 to 93 months of age. So when we performed multivariable logistic regression, we found that the odds of desexing at less than 4 months of age were influenced by all of the variables we looked at except for remoteness area. And when we performed pairwise comparisons, we found that early age desexing was more likely for males, and that purebred males were more likely to be desexed than purebred females at that early age, so less than 4 months. And the odds of desexing at less than 4 months of age were 2.6 times higher in mixed breed cats versus purebred cats, whereas there was no difference between those two groups seen at 6 months of age. And we also found that cats that were born during the winter period had the lowest odds of being desexed at either 4 or 6 months of age. And that could be because perhaps charity neutering drives target cats that are born in the summer and spring periods when most cats are going to be born rather than winter. And then when we compared states, we found that the odds of early age neutering were highest for cats from Victoria, followed by New South Wales, Queensland, ACT and South Australia. And those differences between states were either significant or for the ACT just borderline. And when we looked at socioeconomic indices, we found that they influenced the chances of early age neutering, but in different directions. So early age neutering was least likely in areas with the lowest annual income, but most likely in areas of greatest socioeconomic disadvantage. And there could be various reasons for that. So for instance, neutering charity drives may target these areas of greatest socioeconomic disadvantage, or people may be less likely to acquire pedigree cats and more likely to acquire cats from shelters in those areas, for instance. And then when we compared age at desexing for these different cat cohorts, so just to give you some detail about the 1995 to 2009 time category, we had age at desexing available for about 2,800 cats from that time period. A bit under half were male and 77% were mixed breed cats. And the median age at desexing was 6 months, with a range of less than 1 to 238 months. And of these, less had been neutered by 4 months of age, so only 14.6%, about half by 6 months, and then 75% by 1 year and 24% after 1 year. And then we compared these two time periods, so 2010 and later or before 2010. We found that the mean age at desexing in cats in that later time period was about 8 months, and in the earlier time period was about 21 months, so that was significantly different. And the odds of being desexed before each of the age cutoff time periods that we looked at were significantly greater for those cats born after 2010 compared to that earlier before 2010 time period. I just have a graph to show those differences. So the red line here are cats born from 2010 and later, and the dotted line before 2010, and then we have our age cutoffs down here, so 4 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and we can see that at each time period a greater percentage of cats were neutered in that later time period cohort. So just in summary, there were various limitations to our study. The VCA dataset obviously doesn't cover all cats, only the practices that are included. We're not looking at feral, semi-owned or stray cats, only owned cats that present to veterinary hospitals. And the VCA dataset doesn't necessarily have similar groupings of practices or cats from each state either for us to look at. And we also didn't collect data from the individual patient records. So we didn't look at things like, were these indoor-outdoor cats? How many cats are in the household? So there are other factors that could affect the likelihood of being neutered and age of neutering that we didn't assess in this study. So in summary, what we found is that most cats presented to vets in Australia are neutered, and that cats in that later time period after 2010 were more likely to be neutered at a younger age. But despite that, many of these cats in all of these time periods would have reached sexual maturity before they weren't neutered. So there's still more work to be done here. And our hope is that our findings will help to inform the design of frontline strategies promoting prepubertal neutering of cats. And this study demonstrated for the first time a shift over time towards desexing of younger cats. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Lara. Great talk. Are there any quick questions, either in the Q&A or in the chat? Any quick questions? just a quick one from me, Lara. Why 2010 cutoff? What was the?
It was quite arbitrary, and I was trying to remember today why we ended up doing that, because it was a while ago that we did this study, and I think initially we had accessed VetCompass data from 2010 forwards, and we assessed that initially, and then when we looked at the data and thought about it more, we thought actually it would be good to look at the entire data set and then access that earlier period. So it was a pretty arbitrary sort of cutoff, and we did obviously have smaller numbers of cats in that earlier time period as well.
Great. Okay, thank you.